how do you see business architecture fitting into the strategy journey? And how do you think business architecture and business architects can add the most value into the strategy journey?
Well, I think it probably makes sense for me to actually talk through the stages of the strategy journey and exactly where I see business architecture fitting in. And a lot of it has to do with the maturity of the practice and how people have come to understand where it fits in and where it actually adds value as well. So the strategy journey, as I have it in my book, is actually comprised of 5 different stages. The first stage is motivation and leadership. The second stage is business design, followed by value design. And then I've actually got business architecture as an actual stage in the strategy journey, followed by business transformation. Now, these 5 stages form a cycle that every business or every organization, and this could be, or even every individual goes through, especially if you think of yourself as an entrepreneur or a business of one, you cycle through these stages again and again. And when you actually finish each one, you start again. There are new challenges, new things that come up, new desires and new needs and wants from new customers that are out there. And so, our job as, as business strategists or in supporting any business is to help that business find out what those problems are and then help them solve it through their different services that they would offer to their customers, whether that involves digital technology or not. Okay, so that is actually what the strategy journey actually is. It's a problem solving, business life cycle phasing that just keeps repeating itself again and again. And if you understand what those 5 phases are, and they keep understanding it again and again, what I want people to see is that there is a very, very important component, which I have called business architecture, within that, in the 4th stage, because that's when you actually pull it all together and work out what to do and what to change before you then go away and execute the change in the business transformation phase. And leading up to that 4th phase in business architecture, which is when you pull it all together, structure it, work out what is the best return on investment, what's the right value, what are the right decisions to take, how do what people you need, all those things that we see as being part of the operating model of a business. That is what I see the business architecture role culminating in today and how it's actually evolved. And leading up to that are the other aspects of strategy, which a business architect in most cases wouldn't be responsible for ideating or constructing. They would actually be responsible for validating and receiving that information from, what is the actual business model or the commercial model, what are the revenue targets, to which customers to serve, etc. The business architect is the one that brings all the information about what the company, the organization is trying to achieve, the value that it wants to deliver to different customers, to stakeholders, what constitutes as value to customers, bringing all that together and looking at how the operations and the operating model of the business sits and fits to actually deliver all of those things, and also whether those things are correct or not. Just because somebody thought of something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So the business architect is that. The business architect or the business architecture, and this is why we call it architecture, okay, is about, architecture is not, project management. It's not even the delivery. It's, architects do not do the building work. If you're talking about a real building, architects don't even do a lot of the drawings. The architects are the people who work through what the problems are, what are the opportunities, put that in its different perspectives. Architects actually, real architects actually have these technical drawings that they have about, in different dimensions and different points of view of what a building looks like and what a building is supposed to actually do. How does it perform? What does it support? How does it sit together structurally? All of these different layers have to work together, and to join the dots between all of these different layers and all the different things that would sit together to make this building operate or work and, you know, house somebody, or roof, you know, become the roof, have the airflow, all these other things that, you know, if you're looking at it from a construction perspective and what an architecture does, well, the business architecture role is exactly the same. The difference is that we're not talking about a building, we're talking about a business, okay, or an organization that is there to serve customers and add value. It's about putting all of these different things together into the right shape, into defining what it's supposed to do, how, when, to what end, to what value, from what means, and then actually giving that to the builders, the executioners in the business transformation phase with their roadmaps, etc., to actually run the course of the transformation and do the building work, and then actually going in and checking it, making sure it's still fit for purpose along the lines of when things change, you know, and then applying the appropriate changes and adjustments as necessary, while keeping true to the vision and the purpose of why they went about constructing that building or that business and what it seeks to do from the beginning as well. So they have to be big picture, they have to have the right perspectives, they have to then be able to break it all down and support the executioners and the builders and looking at how to actually transition and make the changes. It's an important mindset to have. You have to actually be very, very open-minded and be able to absorb all of this information, join the dots and look at all these different perspectives and actually still hold true to what it is, the purpose of the whole adventure, the project, the building, the actual business itself. It's not an easy role, and that's why, you know, it's taken so long, I think, for a lot of different companies to understand its role in its place, and that's why I put it in this fourth stage. It's the stage before you do the execution and the transformation, and there is actually a lot of additional strategic thinking that comes into it, but then the business architecture is the one that shapes it and then actually breaks it down into the right plans and the right perspective, so that then the organization and the business can go away and actually do the execution.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Operating model. Since I'm an expert here, I want to ask, because there is confusion or different definitions of what an operating model is. So maybe you could just briefly tell us, how do you define operating model, and what should we have on an operating model?
Really, really good question, because there are so many people who have given the term or the word operating model so many different definitions and meanings. And the way I see it as, let's take it in its truest form. The operating model is, what does it take to actually run the business? Okay. And that means that it's, you know, one perspective, it's your functions, it's your capabilities, it's your people, process, data, and technology systems. You know, it's all of these different things. But the thing is, all of these different things exist in isolation. Okay. The operating model itself is, how do you actually put all of these things together and make it serve its purpose? All right. And you know, how do you take the funding? How do you take the people? How do you take all of these different aspects and actually make it do its work and serve its purpose? It's all the activities that a company or a business or an organization is actually performing at any point in time. And that's why there's a lot of people who get confused about what is a target operating model. A target operating model is simply, what is it that this business needs to be doing, or it should be doing at a point in time in the future, whatever that you may have defined it to be. And so this is why the strategy journey itself describes the operating model. It's not just the, you know, or the target operating model. It's not just the operating model itself. That's, you know, the construction of all the various different people. But these people need to be working with a context for a purpose in a specific way. And it's those other aspects of the strategy journey framework where I've got the mission model, which aligns to the motivation and leadership and what it's supposed to, you know, the motivation and leadership and the mission model directs the organization in how it sets about its business. Okay, and it makes it clear what are the actual targets, or what is the motivation, and what it is that this enterprise or organization seeks to achieve. And then we've got the business model, which everybody knows about, which is commercially, what is this organization or business going to actually do to create value? What is that value? You know, specifically, what comprises that commercially? What are the costs associated? Then you've got the value model, which, you know, people are saying, well, isn't the value model within the business model? I've had this question asked of me several times, including recently on LinkedIn by a business architect who said, you know, isn't the value model within the business model? And I was like, the value proposition is within the business model, but the value model itself isn't. The value model is actually what constitutes value. Okay, not just in the value proposition, but what constitutes value to customers. They're different perspectives. You know, if you want to think about the way that we've looked at transformation, people are always looking at it in isolation, in the form of what makes up the value proposition versus what does the company do versus what customers want. And actually, you know, it's already been defined. They call it human-centered design. You actually need to find this sweet spot in the middle between all three to construct what actually constitutes value to all of these different dimensions, and really know what that actually is. So the value model is when you actually work out what really constitutes as value. And from there, that's when you observe and find the opportunities for change in the operating model itself. You know, what do you actually go about changing in the operating model? And then you've got the, you know, you've got the operating model, which is how the business works today. And then you've got transformation, or you've got the transformation model, which is what are the actual steps and activities, some people call that project management, that you would actually undertake to transition the organization from where you are today, this operating model today, to where you want to be in the future. And I think it's really important to stress this point about why operating models stand out versus what a business model is. Okay, if you have a look at the pandemic right now, look at the number of business models that have absolutely disappeared overnight. Okay, and with that goes all these jobs and entire industries potentially, right? And whereas actually the companies or the businesses that are surviving, that are doing really well, have an operating model. And what they've been able to do is take the resources that they have inside of their operating model and actually literally transition these people, these processes, etc., adapt them to a new business model. So business models come and go, but the operating model doesn't. If you've got a sustainable, robust, agile operating model in how you actually do what you do, and you may even have specific things that you do very, very well, you have then the opportunity to look at, well, there are all these other things that we do that aren't necessary anymore in the new business model. So we'll just stop doing them and we'll just divert our resources towards doing the things that people actually want, that they will consume, that they will buy. And that's what we transition our operating model towards. So if you have an operating model with the right people, with the right capabilities, with the right skill sets, with the right machines, technology, etc., and it's also an agile, adaptable operating model, then you have the opportunity to be able to transition and change towards supporting whatever business model comes from the market, okay, from the economy. And it's, you know, and you can see how a disruption like Corona has actually thrown almost every business model upside down in a lot of negative ways, but also in some positive ways. Just have a look at the, you know, all the digital businesses out there and how their business models have actually gone up. You know, the more digital, you know, channels or platform a business is in how it actually delivers its services to customers, the more likely it is to have seen an increase in revenue during the pandemic versus those that have not gone digital or applied as many digital solutions in the way that they actually interact or serve their customers. So I think that's the key thing about operating models that I want people to get across. It is actually what makes a business, what activities it's doing, what actually makes up a business itself. And that includes its purpose and why it's there, the value that it provides, whichever business model it seeks to deploy or try at any point in time, and all of the people, processes, data, and systems and things that it uses to actually deliver its services to customers.
Perfect. And I really liked your point there around the the agility and the resilience of being able to configure, right, those reusable business components in different ways in support of new business models or whatever it may be when we need to pivot.